The frontier world of Arden 9 was quiet, almost forgotten by the greater galaxy. Its dusty fields stretched for miles, and the sky always seemed to hold a faint orange glow from the twin suns. Few travelers ever came this far, and even fewer stayed. For most people, it was only a refueling point on their way to busier trade lanes. But for Elias Corrin, it was home. He was a farmer, not the kind who owned great machines or droids like those on wealthy colonies. Elias had an old homestead, built of stone and metal scraps left over from a crashed transport decades ago. He lived simply, raising hardy crops suited for Arden soil and keeping a few animals imported from Earth. Life here was not easy, but it was honest. Elias preferred it that way. That night, a storm rolled across the plains. Arden's storms were no ordinary storms. They carried heavy winds, sharp lightning, and sand that could cut skin if one stayed outside too long. The walls of his farmhouse creaked under the pressure, but Elias had grown used to the sound. He sat at his wooden table, sipping a warm drink he brewed from local roots, and listened to the storm batter the windows. Just as he was about to retire for the night, a knock came at the door. At first, Elias thought it was the wind, but then it came again, 3 sharp knocks, desperate and hurried, his brow furrowed. Nobody visited during storms. Few visited at all. Cautiously, he set his mug down and grabbed the old hunting rifle he kept by the door. He pulled the door open just enough to see 2 cloaked figures standing in the rain and sand. Their cloaks were soaked, their shoulders hunched, and their breathing heavy as though they had been running. "Please," one of them said, her voice soft but urgent. "We need shelter." The second figure added, "Just for the night. We beg you." Their voices were strange, refined, melodic, carrying an accent unlike any Elias had heard from passing traders. Something in their tone struck him. Not only desperation, but dignity, as if they were not used to asking for help yet had no choice. Elias hesitated only a moment. Whoever they were, they would not survive the storm outside. He opened the door wide. "Get inside before the wind tears you apart," he said. The strangers entered quickly, pulling their cloaks tighter. Elias shut the door behind them and locked it against the storm. The taller one pulled back her hood first. To Elias's surprise, her face was not human. Her skin shimmered faintly like polished silver, her eyes a deep violet that glowed slightly in the dim light. Her hair was long and pale, almost like strands of moonlight. The second followed, shorter in height but equally striking. Her eyes were emerald green, her features sharp yet graceful. Her cloak had torn in several places, and her hands shook, as though from exhaustion. Elias had seen many alien species in passing, but none like them. They were beautiful in a way that felt otherworldly, but also clearly exhausted, as though they had traveled far without rest. "You're not locals," Elias said simply, leaning his rifle against the wall. The taller one bowed her head slightly. "We are travelers, caught in the storm. Thank you for your kindness." Elias studied them carefully. Something about their posture, the way they spoke, told him they were not ordinary travelers. Their cloaks were fine, woven with patterns that shimmered faintly in the light. Their accents carried a weight of refinement, like nobles speaking in a marketplace. Still, he did not press. Instead, he set another pot on the stove and began to prepare food. "You must be hungry," Elias said. "I don't have much, but it's warm." The shorter one gave him a tired smile. "You're more generous than most we've met." Elias served them bowls of thick stew made from root vegetables and grain. They ate slowly at first, then with more eagerness once they realized he asked for nothing in return. Elias sat across the table, watching them carefully though not unkindly. "What brings you to Arden 9? He asked at last. The taller one hesitated. Her eyes flicked to her companion, then back to Elias. Finally, she said, "We are on a journey. Circumstances forced us to land here." "That's a long way of saying, we're hiding," Elias said bluntly. The shorter one nearly choked on her stew, coughing into her hand. The taller one's expression tightened, but Elias noticed she did not deny it. You don't need to tell me your story, Elias continued. Not tonight. But you should know, Arden is quiet, yet not invisible. Strangers draw attention here. If someone's chasing you, they might not be far behind. The shorter one finally spoke, her voice softer now. We understand. We will leave at first light. Elias nodded. He had no wish to get entangled in off-world trouble. Still, he could not help but feel a stirring of curiosity, and something else. They were clearly more than wanderers. Their grace, their bearing, their words, it all hinted at something larger. Hours passed. The storm outside raged, but inside the farmhouse it was calm. Elias gave them spare blankets and laid out a space by the fire where they could rest. Before sleeping, the taller one approached him. You risked yourself by opening your door tonight, she said. Most would have ignored us. Elias shrugged. Didn't seem right leaving anyone out there. She looked at him for a long moment, as though studying him in turn. Then she inclined her head in a gesture that carried more weight than he. Understood. You have our gratitude, human. Elias chuckled lightly. Names are easier than titles, minds Elias. The shorter one, already wrapped in a blanket, gave him a faint smile. Then, thank you, Elias. By morning the storm had passed. The land outside was quiet again, though signs of damage marked the fields. Elias rose early, tending to his animals before returning to check on his unexpected guests. They were already awake, their cloaks repaired as best as possible. They stood near the door, ready to leave. Before they could say anything, a distant sound reached Elias's ears. The low hum of an engine. He stepped outside, scanning the horizon. A small shuttle flew low across the plains, its light sweeping the ground as though searching for something. When Elias turned back, he saw the two women tense, their eyes narrowing. For the first time, he saw fear in their faces. They're here, the shorter one whispered. Elias frowned. Who? Neither answered, but he could guess. Whoever hunted them had just arrived on Arden. That was when realization struck him. These were no ordinary travelers. Their cloaks, their speech, their presence, it all clicked into place. He looked at them again, really looked, and saw what he had missed before. Their jewelry, subtle yet intricate, bore symbols he had seen once in an old trader's book. Symbols of the Vailari Empire, one of the most powerful alien kingdoms in the galaxy. These were not mere wanderers. They were royalty, and Elias, a simple farmer, had sheltered them under his roof. Morning sunlight spread across the plains of Arden 9, turning the sand and stone into golden waves. Elias stood just outside his farmhouse, staring at the small shuttle that had flown low during the dawn. The engine's hum still echoed faintly in the distance. His jaw tightened. Whoever those pilots were, they were searching for something, or someone. Inside the farmhouse, the two alien women were tense. Their cloaks no longer hid their elegance, and Elias knew the truth now. These were not ordinary travelers, not even high merchants. They were royalty, princesses of the Vailari Empire, one of the most powerful civilizations known among the stars. And if he had guessed right, that meant the people chasing them would not stop until they were found. Elias stepped back inside. The taller princess, the one with violet eyes, was pacing near the table, her hands clenched tightly. The shorter princess with emerald eyes stood by the window, watching the horizon with worry. They saw the homestead, Elias said. That shuttle was searching. If they circle back, they'll come straight here. The violet-eyed princess stopped pacing. Then we must leave before they arrive. We cannot draw you into our fight. Elias raised an eyebrow. Too late for that. You knocked on my door. The green-eyed princess looked at him, guilt in her expression. We didn't mean to, but if you stay near us, you'll be in danger. Their soldiers are ruthless. Elias walked to the corner where an old chest rested. He opened it and pulled out a pack, some rope, and an energy lantern. Then he took down his rifle from the wall. You're forgetting something, he said. This is my land. I know every hill, every rock, every dry riverbed. You think I'll let some outsiders march in and burn my home? Not happening. The princesses looked at each other in silence. They were not used to defiance from others, especially not from a simple human farmer. Besides, Elias added, checking the rifle's charge, you haven't even told me your names. If I'm risking my neck, I'd like to know who I'm protecting. The violet-eyed one finally spoke. Her voice softened, no longer as guarded. I am Princess Liara of the Vailari throne. The green-eyed one lowered her hood as well. And I am her sister, Princess Ceres. Elias gave a small nod. Liara and Ceres. Fine. Then let's make sure no one drags you away from here. The hum of the shuttle grew louder again. Dust. Clouds rose in the distance, ground patrols. They were moving fast, following tracks through the sand. Elias realized the storm had covered most trails, but not all. Some signs of the princess's landing still remained. They'll be here, soon, Ceres whispered. Elias motioned toward the back door. Then we don't wait. Out the rear path. Move quickly. The three slipped out, moving into the open fields beyond the farmhouse. Elias led them toward a stretch of rocky ridges that rose like jagged teeth from the plains. He knew hidden paths. There, places where a man could disappear even under pursuit. But the pursuers were skilled. Within minutes, dust trails closed in behind them. A voice carried on the wind through a loudspeaker. Surrender the fugitives, human. This is not your fight, Elias muttered under his breath. Always the same line. He glanced at the princesses. Keep moving, don't stop until I tell you. The pursuers, 6 armored soldiers, appeared at the ridgeline, weapons gleaming in the sun. They advanced quickly, confident, thinking their prey had nowhere to go. Elias acted first. He lifted his rifle and fired. A bright pulse shot struck the ground near the lead soldier, kicking up sand and startling them. He wasn't aiming to kill, only to stall. The soldiers spread out, returning fire. Bright blue streaks cut through the air, sizzling past the rocks. The princesses ducked, eyes wide. Elias pulled them down a narrow cut in the ridge, a path only locals would know. Stay low, he barked. They scrambled through the narrow way, rocks scraping their cloaks until they emerged into a dry ravine. The walls rose high on either side, shielding them from enemy fire. Liara caught her breath. You fight soldiers with nothing but an old rifle? Elias smirked grimly. Sometimes the land fights for you. The soldiers followed into the ravine, but Elias knew how to use the terrain. He found a pile of loose stones at a bend. With a quick shove, he sent them tumbling down. The rock slide crashed into the path, forcing 2 of the soldiers to leap back, cutting their line of advance. The rest pressed forward, shouting commands in a sharp alien tongue. Ceres pulled at Elias's sleeve. We must keep running. Not yet, Elias said, crouching near a corner of the ravine. He pulled out a small metal canister from his pack, one of his homemade smoke bombs, meant for keeping animals away from crops, but useful now. He struck it, and thick smoke poured into the passage. The soldiers coughed and stumbled, their visors clouded. Elias led the princesses through a side path, one that twisted upward toward the surface. When they finally emerged, they stood atop a wide plateau, overlooking the plains. The farmhouse was far behind now, smoke still rising from where stray shots had struck it. Elias's chest tightened, but he kept his focus. We can't go back there, he said. They'll expect it. Then where? Liara asked. Elias scanned the horizon. In the distance, jagged cliffs rose higher than anything else around. At their base lay an abandoned mining outpost, rusted, broken, forgotten. Few remembered it even existed. There, Elias pointed. Old mines. We can hide until they pass. The journey across the plateau was harsh. The suns rose higher, burning hot. The princesses' cloaks offered little protection. Elias gave them water from his pack, though it meant less for himself. As they moved, Ceres finally spoke, her voice trembling. Why do you help us, Elias? You could have handed us over and been safe. Elias shrugged without slowing. Because handing people over to be hunted doesn't sit right with me. Doesn't matter if you're princesses or beggars. Liara studied him, her violet eyes narrowing slightly. You are unlike most humans we've met. Elias gave a dry laugh. Probably because you've only met traders and officials. They're used to bowing to anyone richer or stronger. Out here, it's different. Out here, you survive by standing your ground. By late afternoon, they reached the cliffs. The mining outpost loomed at the base, silent and decayed. Rusted towers leaned under the weight of years, and collapsed tunnels yawned like dark mouths. This way, Elias said, leading them inside. The interior smelled of dust and metal. Faded machinery lay broken, and the floor was littered with old tools. Yet it was shelter. Elias found a corner where they could rest without being seen from above. For a while, silence hung between them. The princesses drank water and caught their breath. Elias checked his rifle's power cells, grimacing. They were running low. Liara finally broke the silence. You risked much today, more than any stranger would. Elias met her gaze. I told you, leaving you to die wasn't an option. Sarah's expression softened. She wrapped her cloak tighter and whispered, You don't even know the danger you face. Those who pursue us are not just soldiers. They belong to a faction that would tear worlds apart to claim us. Elias leaned back against the wall. Then, it's a good thing this world isn't theirs to claim. Night began to fall. Outside, patrol lights swept the plains, searching. Distant engines rumbled, but none approached the cliffs yet. Elias kept watch at the doorway, his rifle across his knees. The princesses sat nearby, speaking quietly in their own tongue before finally resting against the wall. As the stars filled the sky, Elias thought of his farm. His home might already be ruined, his crops burned, his animals scattered. All because he chose to open a door during a storm. Yet as he looked at the two princesses sleeping, he felt no regret. Something told him this moment, this choice was larger than his simple life had ever been. The chase was not over, it had only begun. The morning sun rose slowly over Arden 9, lighting the cliffs in pale orange. From the old mining outpost, Elias could see the wide plain stretching endlessly, silent after a long night of engines and patrol lights sweeping the land. The pursuers had not found them yet, but Elias knew they would not give up so easily. Inside the ruined building, the two alien princesses stirred awake. Liara, the older sister with violet eyes, rose first. Her back was stiff from sleeping against the cold wall, but her posture was still graceful. Saris, the younger with emerald eyes, yawned softly and rubbed her hands to warm them. Elias sat near the doorway, rifle across his knees, watching the horizon. He had not slept much. His thoughts kept circling back to the same truth. His home was likely lost. Even if the soldiers had not burned it, they would surely leave it in ruins. Everything he had built for years, the fields, the animals, the simple peace, was gone. Yet despite the loss, Elias did not regret opening his door that stormy night. Something inside told him it had been the right choice. Liara approached quietly, her cloak drawn tight against the morning chill. You stayed awake all night, she said. Elias shrugged. Somebody had to. You risk yourself for us again and again, she said softly. Why? Elias glanced at her, then back to the plains. Because you needed help. And because if someone tried to take my sisters, I'd hope a stranger would do the same. Her expression softened. For a moment, the heavy weight of royalty fell away, and she was simply a woman grateful for kindness. Saris joined them, her green eyes thoughtful. We cannot keep running forever, they will not stop. Elias nodded slowly. Then what's the plan? Liara hesitated, then spoke in a lower voice. We must reach our mother, the queen. Only under her protection will we be safe. But it will not be simple. Our enemies are strong. They dare not strike openly at the royal court, yet they will hunt us until we arrive. The queen? Elias raised an eyebrow. You mean the queen of the Vailari Empire? Yes, Liara said. Our mother rules from the capital world, Vaelaris Prime. Elias let out a long breath. He had heard of the place. Traders told stories of its shining crystal towers, its endless fleets, and the way its rulers held power across dozens of systems. For a simple farmer, the thought of standing before such a queen was almost absurd. But as he looked at Liara and Ceres, he realized this path was already chosen. Whether he wanted it or not, he was caught in their struggle now. They left the mining outpost before midday, keeping to the ridges and narrow passes. Elias guided them carefully, avoiding the open plains where patrols might spot them. His knowledge of the land proved invaluable. He knew where water pools collected after storms, where the rocks provided shade, and where hidden gullies offered safe paths. By evening, they reached the edge of a canyon where an old communication tower stood. Long abandoned, its frame leaned precariously, but parts of it still functioned. "We can send a signal from here," Ceres said. "If we reach one of the Queen's envoys, they will come for us." Elias frowned. "Won't your enemies trace the signal?" Liara shook her head. "Not if we send it through royal encryption. Only my mother's court will understand." They climbed the tower together. Inside, broken panels lined the walls, but the central console still had faint power. Elias worked with Ceres to connect the wires while Liara entered codes only she would know. At last, the console glowed faintly, and Liara's voice carried through the transmitter. "This is Princess Liara of Valaris with Princess Ceres. We request immediate extraction under royal decree. Location, Arden 9. Hostiles pursuing." Signal crackled for a moment before a clear voice answered. "Message received. Stand by for envoy." Relief washed across Ceres's face. Elias, however, remained cautious. "How long until they get here?" "Not long," Liara said. "But we must hold until then." That night, as stars glittered across the sky, Elias sat apart from the sisters. He stared at the rifle across his lap, feeling its weight. He was just a farmer, yet here he was guarding alien princesses, waiting for an envoy from one of the galaxy's most powerful empires. He thought of his lost farm, of the quiet life he once lived. There was no going back now. The next day, the enemy returned. Engines roared across the canyon as 3 shuttles descended, soldiers spilling out in formation. Dust rose around them, and their commander shouted orders in a sharp alien tongue. "They've found us," Ceres whispered, fear in her voice. Elias steadied his rifle. "Then we buy time." The soldiers advanced quickly, weapons ready. Liara stood tall beside Elias, her violet eyes blazing with defiance. "You cannot hold them off alone," she said. Elias smirked. "Watch me." He fired first, striking the ground near their lead soldier to scatter the formation. The soldiers returned fire, blue energy bolts lighting the canyon. Elias ducked behind the console, pulling the princesses with him. "Stay down," he barked. The fight was fierce. Elias used every trick he knew, ricocheting shots off metal beams, kicking sand into the air to blind their aim, leading the sisters through narrow side passages of the tower. The soldiers pressed hard, but they had not expected such resistance from a single human farmer. "Why does he fight like this?" Ceres whispered to her sister as Elias pulled them behind cover. "Because he refuses to surrender," Liara answered. "That is his strength." At last, when the soldiers began to close in, a thunderous sound shook the canyon. A massive royal cruiser descended from the skies, its hull shining like silver crystal. Blue light poured from its engines, scattering the dust below. The Vailari, crest a symbol of power known across the stars, glowed bright on its side. The enemy soldiers froze. They knew they could not fight a royal warship. Quickly they retreated to their shuttles, engines screaming as they fled into the horizon. The cruiser landed, and a ramp lowered to the canyon floor. At the top stood armored guards, their armor gleaming, and behind them a tall envoy draped in ceremonial robes. "Princess Liara, Princess Ceres," the envoy called. "By order of Her Majesty the Queen, we are here to escort you to Valaris Prime." Liara and Ceres stepped forward with relief. Elias followed slowly, his rifle still, in hand, uncertain of what awaited him. The journey aboard the royal cruiser was unlike anything Elias had ever known. The halls were lined with shining crystal walls, the air fresh with a soft hum of energy. Guards treated the princesses with reverence, bowing deeply, but when they looked at Elias, their expressions were puzzled. He was clearly no noble, no soldier, yet he walked beside the princesses as if an equal. During the voyage, Sarah stayed close to Elias. "You saved us more than once," she said softly. "If not for you, we would be lost." Elias shrugged. "You'd have done the same for me." She smiled faintly. "I don't think many in our empire would." Days later, the cruiser arrived at Valaris Prime. Elias stared out the viewport in awe. The planet was breathtaking, a world of shining towers that reached into the sky, glittering rivers that flowed like silver threads, and skies alive with floating ships. The capital city spread across the horizon like a jewel of light. The cruiser descended into the royal palace grounds. The palace itself was a wonder. Spires of crystal, bridges of silver, and gardens that glowed faintly even in daylight. Thousands of citizens stood beyond the gates cheering as the princesses returned. Inside the grand hall, Elias followed Liara and Ceres, feeling small against the towering crystal walls. The floor shone like polished glass, reflecting their steps. At the far end sat a throne carved from pure crystal, and upon it sat a figure who radiated power and grace, the Queen of Valaris. Her presence filled the hall. She was tall, her silver hair flowing like starlight, her eyes glowing faintly with wisdom and authority. When she spoke, her voice carried across the chamber like music. "My daughters return," she said, "and with them, the human who sheltered them." Elias froze, realizing all eyes were upon him. The queen studied him, her gaze sharp yet curious. "Step forward, Elias Corrin," she commanded. He walked slowly to the center of the hall, bowing his head slightly. The queen regarded him for a long moment before speaking again. "You sheltered my daughters when others hunted them. You fought soldiers with nothing but courage and your wits. You stood where many would have fled. Tell me, human, why?" Elias raised his head, meeting her gaze. "Because it was right. They needed help. That's all." The hall fell silent. His words were simple, yet carried weight. The queen's lips curved into a faint smile. Few in this galaxy speak so plainly. Fewer still act without thought of reward. Then, to the shock of all present, she rose from her throne. Her voice rang clear. "Elias Corrin of Earth, you shall not return to the fields of Arden. You have proven yourself more than a simple farmer. By my decree you will stand in this court as protector of my daughters. And for the bond you have forged, I demand more still." The hall grew tense. The queen's eyes glimmered as she spoke the words that would change Elias's life forever. "You shall marry them." The great crystal hall of Valaris Prime fell silent after the queen's words. "You shall marry them." The declaration echoed across the chamber, startling nobles and guards alike. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some bowed in agreement, others gasped in disbelief. Elias stood frozen at the center of the hall, unsure if he had heard correctly. Marry them? Him, a farmer, a wanderer of no title, no power, marry not one, but two alien princesses? Elias swallowed hard. He looked at Liara and Ceres. The sisters themselves seemed caught between shock and confusion. They did not protest, but their wide eyes revealed they had not expected this decree either. The queen raised her hand, silencing the whispers of the court. Her gaze rested firmly on Elias. "Your courage saved my daughters. But words and bravery in the wild are not enough to bind you to Valaris. You must prove yourself worthy before this empire. Only then shall my decree be sealed." Elias drew, in a slow breath. "And if I fail these trials?" The queen's violet eyes glimmered. "Then you shall return to the dust from which you came, and your name forgotten. But if you succeed, you will stand not only as husband to my daughters, but as a bridge between our peoples." The hall erupted again in murmurs. Elias clenched his fists, then spoke plainly. "Then I'll face your trials." The first trial, the Hall of Voices the next day, Elias was brought to the Hall of Voices, a grand chamber where scholars and philosophers gathered. The test was not one of weapons, but of words. Dozens of nobles sat in a circle, their crystal robes gleaming. At the center stood Elias, surrounded by pillars that glowed faintly as if listening. A high scholar stepped forward. "Human, this trial shall test your wisdom. You must answer questions that have challenged rulers for centuries. Speak not with force, but with truth." The first question came: what is stronger, power or mercy? Elias thought for a long moment. Around him nobles waited, some expecting him to stumble. Finally he said, "Power builds empires. Mercy keeps them alive. A ruler with only power is feared. A ruler with mercy is followed. And when both are needed, it is mercy that turns enemies into allies." The pillars glowed brighter. Some nobles nodded reluctantly. Another question came. "What is the value of a single life against the needs of many?" Elias frowned. "Every great number is made of single lives. If you throw away the one too easily, the many won't trust you when it's their turn. Sometimes a leader must sacrifice. But if you forget the value of one person, you'll lose the heart of them all." The hall grew silent. The pillars shone brilliantly, as though recording his words. The scholar bowed. "The first trial is complete. The second trial, the arena of strength." The next day, Elias was led to a wide arena carved into crystal cliffs. Thousands of Vylari citizens filled the stands, eager to see this human's measure. "This trial," the herald announced, "is not to test your victory in battle, but your strength of will. You will face challenges of endurance. If you stand until the end, you pass." Elias stepped into the sand, his heart pounding. Across the arena, 3 massive beasts were released, creatures unlike anything he had ever seen. Their bodies shimmered, with scales of glass, their claws like knives, their roars shaking the air. The crowd cheered as the beasts charged. Elias gripped a simple staff, the only weapon given to him. Fear clawed at his chest, but he forced himself to focus. He could not outmatch them in strength, but he could outlast them. The first beast lunged. Elias dodged, rolling in the sand, and struck its leg with the staff. The blow barely slowed it, but he used the moment to scramble up onto a stone ledge. The second beast roared, swiping at him. The claws tore the air, but Elias ducked low, the strike smashing stone instead. He felt the sting of dust on his face but kept moving. Minutes turned to hours. Elias bled from shallow cuts. His muscles screamed, but he refused to fall. Every time the beast struck, he rolled away. Every time they cornered him, he found an opening to escape. The crowd grew louder with each moment. What began as doubt turned into awe. This human would not give up. At last, the final horn sounded. The beasts were pulled back into their cages, and Elias collapsed onto one knee, exhausted but alive. "The second trial is complete," the herald declared. The third trial, the Veil of Spirits on. The third day, Elias was led into a quiet temple, deep within the palace grounds. The place was dim, lit only by glowing crystals in the walls. Liara and Saris stood by the entrance, watching as their mother's priestesses prepared the chamber. This trial was the most mysterious, one spoken of in whispers even among nobles. "The Veil of Spirits," the high priestess said, "shows the truth of one's heart. You will enter alone. No blade, no voice. Only your spirit shall face what lies beyond." Elias entered the chamber. A thin mist filled the room, swirling like living breath. He felt a pull, like something inside him was being weighed. Visions formed in the mist. He saw his farm on Arden 9, the animals he once cared for, the home now likely destroyed. The vision asked, "Do you long for the past?" Elias whispered, "Yes. But longing doesn't change the future." The vision faded. Then he saw himself holding the rifle, standing before soldiers, fighting hopeless battles. The mist whispered, "Do you fear being weak?" Elias closed his eyes. "Of course. But fear means nothing if you don't move anyway." The image vanished. Finally, the mist formed Liara and Saris, their eyes filled with trust. The voice asked, "Do you carry them as duty or as choice?" Elias's chest tightened. He thought of the stormy night, of the chase, of the canyon battle. He thought of how they had looked at him, not as a tool, but as someone who stood by them. "Choice," he said firmly, "always choice." The mist dissolved and the chamber glowed brightly. The priestesses bowed as he stepped out. The third trial is complete. After the trial's word of Elias's success spread quickly through the city, crowds gathered outside the palace gates, curious about the human who had endured the Hall of Voices, the arena of strength and the Vale of Spirits. Inside the palace, nobles whispered uneasily. Some were impressed, others angered. How could a farmer stand where seasoned warriors had failed? That evening Elias was summoned once more to the throne hall. Liara and Saris stood beside their mother. The queen's eyes glimmered as she regarded him. "You have passed all 3 trials. You have spoken truth, endured hardship, and revealed your spirit. You are worthy." Elias bowed his head slightly. "I only did what I had to." The queen smiled faintly. "That is why you succeeded." Then she looked at her daughters. "But one thing remains. Marriage cannot be bound by command alone. It must be sealed by choice." Liara and Saris exchanged glances. Slowly, they stepped forward. "We choose," Liara said. Her voice was steady, but her violet eyes held warmth. Saris nodded, her green eyes bright. "We choose as well." The hall fell silent once again. The queen rose from her throne, her voice ringing across the chamber. "Then it is decided. Soon all shall witness the union of Vylaris and humanity. A new chapter begins." That night Elias sat in the palace garden, staring at the stars. The weight of what had happened pressed on him. He had come from dust and fields, from a small, forgotten world. Now he was at the heart of one of the galaxy's greatest empires, chosen to stand beside princesses, bound by fate and choice alike. And yet deep inside he wondered, was this truly destiny, or simply the result of a single night when he opened his door? The trials were over, but his journey was only beginning. The palace of Vylaris Prime glimmered under the light of twin moons, casting long silver reflections across the crystal floors. Elias walked slowly through the halls, his thoughts heavy yet restless. He had passed the queen's trials, endured challenges no human would expect, and earned the trust and choice of the princesses. And yet the weight of the queen's decree pressed on him. He was no longer a simple farmer. Soon he would stand as husband to not one but 2 alien princesses, in a court filled with thousands of eyes and centuries of expectation. He paused in a quiet hallway, leaning against the cool crystal wall. The distant hum of the palace reminded him how far he had come, from a small homestead on Arden 9 to the heart of an empire. Liara's voice called softly from behind him. "Elias." He turned to see both princesses approaching, their cloaks brushing the polished floor. Their expressions were calm, but the faint tension in their shoulders betrayed their own concerns. "Have you made your decision?" Liara asked. Elias ran a hand through his hair. "I'm not sure. I passed the trials, yes. But all of this, it's more than I expected. I didn't come here to be a prince or a husband, I just wanted to help you stay safe." Saris stepped closer. "You've already risked everything, Arden, your life, even your freedom. You have nothing left to lose." "Exactly," Elias said. "That's the problem. I've lost everything I knew. My home, my fields, the simple life I had. None of that matters anymore. I can't just say yes because you ask me to. I have to choose for myself, or else it isn't real." Liara and Saris exchanged glances. They understood. Despite their royal upbringing, they too had been shaped by choice, by trust, by courage. The following morning the queen summoned Elias again. The throne room was quieter than before. Courtiers lined the walls, their eyes attentive, waiting to witness the final decision. The princesses stood at the center, their hands intertwined as they faced the human who had captured the attention of the entire empire. Elias stepped forward, taking a deep breath. He felt the weight of centuries of tradition in the air, yet, he reminded himself, he was still just a man. A simple man. "Your Majesty," he began, bowing respectfully. "I am grateful for the trials, for your trust, and for the princess's choice. But I cannot agree to marriage unless it is truly my will, not simply obedience to a royal decree." The queen's gaze was unwavering. "And your will, Elias? What does it tell you?" He straightened, meeting her eyes. "My will tells me that if I choose, it must be because I want to be here with Liara and Saris, not because I am commanded. I must be free to say yes or no, otherwise it is not a choice worth making." The court fell silent. Even the queen regarded him with a new curiosity, as though weighing the truth in his words. Liara stepped forward, her violet eyes bright. "Elias, we understand. We never asked you to decide without thought. We only want you to stand with us because you wish it." Saris nodded. "You have already proven your courage, your honesty, and your heart. That is why we chose you. But the choice must be yours alone." Elias took a long breath, feeling the enormity of the moment. He thought of the stormy night when the princesses had knocked on his door. He remembered the chase across the fields, the dust, the narrow cliffs, the roar of engines, and the hum of the royal cruiser. He recalled every trial, every challenge, every choice he had made for them, not for reward, not for title, but simply because it was right. And now, the choice was his. He looked at Liara first. "You showed me what courage looks like. You never demanded my loyalty, yet you earned it." Then he looked at Saris. "You taught me that trust is stronger than fear, that even in a world full of power and danger, the right heart can guide the way." The court held its breath. Even the queen seemed to lean forward slightly, as though eager to see what a human would do when given the ultimate decision. Elias knelt slowly on one knee, bowing his head. "I choose. Not because of decree, not because of duty, but because I want to. I choose to stand with you, Liara and Saris. I choose this path because it is ours to walk together." A murmur spread across the hall. The princesses stepped closer, their faces softening. Liara reached out, taking his hand, her violet eyes shining. "And I choose you, Elias," she said, her voice steady. "Not because of title, but because you are the human who stood by us when no one else would." Saris mirrored her sister, her green eyes warm. "And I choose you too. You have proven yourself worthy, not just in trials, but in heart." The queen's lips curved into a rare smile. She rose from her throne and walked down the steps, her voice strong yet gentle. "So it is done," she declared. "Elias Corrin, by choice and courage you are accepted into this court. The human who stood for my daughters shall now stand beside them as partner, equal in will and respect." The hall erupted in applause. Guards and courtiers alike bowed, some smiling in admiration, others nodding with respect. The union was not simply a formality. It was a symbol that courage, honesty, and human spirit could stand alongside empires and even shape them. In the days that followed, preparations began for the ceremonial joining. Elias moved through the palace with a mix of awe and humility. He marveled at the gardens that glowed faintly even at night, the crystal bridges spanning rivers of silver, and the citizens who greeted him with curiosity rather than fear. Liara and Saris were always near, walking beside him, sharing laughter and quiet conversations. For Elias, the bond deepened not because of grandeur or ceremony, but because of shared trust. He was no longer just a visitor in their world, he was part of it. One evening, as the twin moons reflected across a palace pond, Elias stood with the princesses. "Do you think the queen knew all along?" he asked quietly. Liara smiled. "She knew we would choose, and she knew you would choose. But she had to see it for herself. Even a queen cannot decree the heart." Saris nodded. "That is the true strength of choice. Titles, power, Even trials cannot replace the will to act with honesty and courage. Elias looked up at the moons, feeling a calm he had never known. The empire was vast, the responsibilities immense, yet he felt ready. Not because he had passed trials, but because he had chosen his path with full knowledge and full heart. The day of the ceremony arrived. The throne hall, now decorated with flowing crystals and soft lights, was filled with the citizens of Valoris Prime. The queen presided at the center, the princesses by her side. Elias walked forward, the weight of countless eyes upon him, yet his steps were steady. Liara took his right hand, Saris his left. They looked at him not as royalty, not as a challenge, but as partners who had walked alongside him through danger and choice. Today, the queen declared, we witnessed not a marriage of title, but a union of trust, courage, and free will. Let this be a symbol to all, that humanity can stand equal among empires not by force but by heart. The hall erupted in applause, the citizens cheering. Elias felt the warmth of acceptance not only from the court but from two beings who had once been strangers, now bound to him in trust and choice. Liara leaned slightly, whispering, "You did it, Elias. You chose." Saris smiled softly. "And we are honored to have you with us." Elias looked at both of them, feeling the weight of the journey that had brought him here. From the stormy night on Arden 9 to the trials, to this very moment. He smiled. "I chose," he said. "And I will walk this path with you, whatever comes." The queen nodded, pleased. "Then let this day be remembered, not for power, not for wealth, but for courage, choice, and the strength of humanity." Outside, the sky was filled with ships celebrating the union, their lights reflecting across the crystal towers. Inside, Elias walked hand in hand with Liara and Saris, knowing that he had found a new home, not just in the palace but in the hearts of two beings who had once been strangers and now were family. And so, the human who had opened his door, one stormy night had changed the course of two worlds, proving that courage, honesty, and choice could shape not only destiny, but hearts as well.